Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate today on this important suite of legislative amendments that the bill before us asks this House to introduce and to pass. And before I get into the few remarks that I wish to make on the substance of the debate, permit me to address the remarks of my colleagues who have preceded me. First of all, and I regret that he's not here because I don't like to say things critical of persons in their absence, but Senator Mark's contributions amounted to arrant nonsense. Senator Mark spent a third of his time referring to a bill that is not before this House.
Can you imagine?
And then he premised all of it on the basis that Clause 12 of the bill, Clause 9, he said first of all, eventually he was taken to Clause 12, deals with a particular piece of legislation, and he suggested that that legislation that is being amended is to infringe persons' rights to privacy. It is truly regrettable that the citizenry of this country have to be subjected to the kinds of contributions that Senator Mark continues to make his trademark. It is truly regrettable. The clause to which Senator Mark was referring in the substantive legislation which is law is Clause 11.1 of the Tax Information Agreements Act number 5 of 2020. And Section 11.1 says, where the board provides information to a competent authority of another state under any declared agreement, the board shall, within 1 year of such provision, notify the persons in respect of whom the information relates that that personal information related to that person, which is required to be reported under this act and under a declared information agreement, has been forwarded to the competent authority of that state. And subsection 2, a notification under subsection 1 shall be in the form prescribed by the minister by order. That is the law. Senator Mark was allowing himself to suggest that the amendment is seeking to do this. That is already the law since 2020. And the amendment that is being proposed is simply to follow that and to put circumstances on hold in an appropriate situation. It distresses me. It distresses me. So let me say immediately in response to Senator Mark and Senator Gopi Singh, who I am saddened to see associated himself with Senator Mark's comments, this bill requires no special majority. This bill infringes no rights of any citizen of this country. This bill seeks to introduce a number of amendments to different pieces of legislation, which in the scheme of the transparency, and I am grateful for her emphasis on it, which Senator Maraj addressed, in the scheme of the transparency which the bill is seeking to introduce, is proportionate and has the legitimate aim of transparency. And those are the measures by which, in the law that exists today, constitutionality or unconstitutionality is measured. If the law is proportionate and has a legitimate aim, it does not require a special majority. And the Suraj case is the latest authority that makes that very clear and happily has endorsed the fact that a government such as this government, which I am proud to belong to, which has the mandate of the population to govern, can come to this Senate and pass legislation with a simple majority in the interest of transparency, a legitimate aim. Let us get real in these debates that we are allowing ourselves to engage in. I passed to Senator Gopi Singh. He spoke of bearer shares, and he says, who is the beneficial owner of the bearer shares? I beg your pardon, Mr. Vice President. Bearer shares require no beneficial ownership. As the Minister of Finance said, it's like a piece of currency. When I hand it to you, you are the bearer of that share, and you are therefore the owner, and you earn dividends simply by presenting it to the company that has issued it, by possession of the piece of paper. Let's get real. Bearer shares, dividends are paid against the presentation of the paper, and the identity of the beneficial owner, whoever is holding it, doesn't have to be known, because you simply present it. You send your messenger with it to the company to get the dividends. So, Mr. President, Vice President, let's talk about beneficial ownership. And I adopt the language of my colleague, Senator West, member of government, Minister of Public Administration. The concept that translates across all of the legislation that we are seeking to amend today is a simple concept. It is simply about the availability of the identity of the persons who are concealing themselves behind clothes or other disguises of ownership. The natural person, that is what beneficial ownership is about. The natural person behind a legal entity or arrangement, which is now the key requirement that international tax transparency and the fight against tax evasion is concerned with. Tax evasion, financial crimes. Yes, Sydney.
Honourable Attorney General. The issue of beneficial ownership definition is being changed in almost every one of the acts. You will see that there is a change of definition of beneficial ownership. We understand what the real definition is, but why are they seeking to change the definition of beneficial ownership in almost every one of the amendments that we have in these acts?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you, Senator Gopi Singh. Why is that the case? It is because we are dealing with different fact scenarios from case to case. And essentially, the definition of beneficial ownership will have to be adopted and adapted to the particular set of facts that is going to be governed among trustees, among non-profit owners, non-profit ownership organizations, among corporations within the Companies Act, within the tax evasion legislation. So you have to tailor the legislation to get at the identity of the natural person behind the disguise. So you cannot have one definition because you are dealing with different factual scenarios. You are talking about the transparency of ownership in fighting financial crimes, in fighting corruption and money laundering, in fighting terrorist financing. You can't have one definition for terrorist financing and the same definition for a company that is owned by X number of shareholders. You have to tailor the legislation to fit the particular facts that you are dealing with. And that is why, going back to Minister of Public Administration, my colleague Senator West made the point, it is a simple concept. You are identifying the legal, natural person behind the facade of different disguises of ownership. That's what beneficial ownership is about. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the ultimate controller is what this legislation is seeking to do. So in the case of the corporation sole, yes, you have to identify who is the ultimate controller as the corporation sole. As the Minister of Finance said in answer to Senator Richards, in the case of a municipal corporation, it would be the council. You have to look to the controlling entity. And what this legislation is seeking to do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is to give the law in different scenarios the flexibility to be able to hold all of the different controlling entities accountable. It is as simple as that. So if I may just spend a little time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the bill before us. It seeks to amend a number of different pieces of legislation, which include the Trustees Ordinance, the Exchequer and Audit Act, the Minister of Finance Incorporation Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Income Tax Act, the Companies Act, the Partnerships Act, the Securities Act, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, the Non-Profit Organizations Act, the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Act. Let me pause there for a moment. The Companies Act. One of the things that the amendment and the paper is being laid on the table today, even though we are not debating that aspect of it, one of the things that the amendments to the Companies Act is going to seek to do is to provide for not only the definition, an enhanced definition of beneficial ownership, but it is providing for what is known as CROSS, the Computer Registration Online System, which is going to allow, when that amendment is debated in due course, and it is one of the acts that has to be, bills that has to be read with this legislation, it is going to allow everybody who has access to a computer to go online and get access to all of the information in the company's registry in order to be able to register their companies, in order to be able to see who are the beneficial owners under these amendments that we are putting in now, in order to be able to change ownership and change shares. All of that is going to be capable of being done by a computer registration online system, which addresses the point, and I want to correct Senator Gopi Singh. The Registrar General's Department, which is responsible for the oversight and management of the company's registry, is not swamped. They are adequately, if not fully, deployed in terms of personnel. And when I was last in this Senate during the course of the budget debate, I made the point that coming out of the Stanley John report, there are a number of changes that are being made in the Civil Law Department, which includes the Registrar General's Department, and offices are being filled as we speak. There is an ongoing exercise right now that is taking place in the Registrar General's Department, in the Civil Law Department of the Chief State Solicitor and the Solicitor General's Department for a comprehensive restructuring and reform. We've begun those discussions. So the Registrar General's Department is not swamped, and in any event, the system is going to be largely online. So it's not a question of asking, where is the registry? Who is in the registry? What part of Port of Spain is the registry? It's all online. It's out there. Mr. Vice President, as a sovereign nation, Trinidad and Tobago has to accept, and we regret, yes, the playing field is not level, and we would wish that we could ignore the requirements of the OECD and the other Global Forum and Financial Action Task Force requirements that put the pressure on us. But the reality is we belong to an international community with whom we trade, with whom we bank, and in order to be part of that, we have to stand strong and we have to make the legislative amendments to our laws so that we can participate on an ongoing basis with the best of them. And we are doing a pretty good job of it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I may say so with respect. The Global Forum organization concept is a multilateral response to tackle offshore tax evasion, among other things, bringing together 168 jurisdictions, including Trinidad and Tobago, dedicated to improving transparency and the exchange of information for tax purposes. We might wish, and it is a point that, again, I refer to Senator Maraj, and she didn't put it in these terms, but we might wish that we had the benefits of the state of Delaware, which allows for significant tax evasion to large corporations that are not being subjected to what we are being subjected to. But the reality is that we have to work within an international system which we belong to. We have to work with our international banking arrangements. We have to trade on a day-to-day basis with other countries, with other institutions. And in order to be part of those international arrangements, we accept that we must continue to adhere to the requirements that are being made of us by the Global Forum and indeed the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force machinery, which we also belong to. And we continue to do a very good job of leading the charge to ensure that we are compliant. And let me disabuse Senator Gopi Singh. We have done, this government, more work in the period that we've been in office to make ourselves largely compliant than was done before we took office.
So true. So true.
Because Global Forum originated in 2000. It was restructured in September 2020, but it began in 2000, and it's when this government took office that we began to put things in place that now has us admittedly not compliant, not fully compliant, but in the last report that came out of Global Forum in October 17, 2023, it says, among other things, Trinidad and Tobago does not have a rating of at least largely compliant by the Global Forum. It says Trinidad and Tobago has committed to addressing the Global Forum recommendations with regard to automatic exchange of information, criterion 1.1, in due time, so as to achieve determinations of at least in place but needs improvement. So the Global Forum regime recognizes the work that we are doing as a responsible government. And we are here today to appeal to our fellow parliamentarians, not in a partisan way to seek to embarrass each other, but to take our nation forward. And to ask everyone to join with us to take us forward as we continue to trade, to engage, and to find our way forward for the generations to come to benefit from the achievements that we are making on a day-to-day basis in improving the economy of this country for every citizen. Mr. Vice President, I can assure this Honourable House that this government is taking every possible step to secure Trinidad and Tobago's best position as a sovereign nation. And we are addressing our deficiencies as they are revealed to us, as we reveal them to ourselves, because Global Forum is a peer review enterprise that has everybody assisting everybody else to keep themselves under scrutiny. And the peer review system of Global Forum also provides for capacity training and capacity building. So persons from within the Ministry of Finance, persons from within the Ministry of the Attorney General, are constantly going off on training programs so that we can work with our international partners in order to make ourselves more and more compliant. In short, Mr. Vice President, this legislation will address the remaining legislative gaps and the identified 23 recommendations, which, while simultaneously addressing deficiencies observed by Global Forum on transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes. The government continues to work closely with Global Forum, Mr. Vice President, to improve Trinidad and Tobago's current non-compliant rating and to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago becomes fully compliant with Global Forum recommendations. As the world becomes increasingly globalized and increased cross-border activities, and that's important. We are not anymore an island in the Caribbean Sea. We are engaging all the while in cross-border transactions. And as we deal with that, the tax administration needs to work together to ensure that taxpayers pay the right amount of money and are held accountable in a transparent situation. And I appeal to our fellow members of this august chamber to support this government in passing this legislation today so that we continue the work for our citizens and the generations of Trinidadians and Tobagonians to follow. Mr. Vice President, thank you very much.
Senator Vera.